just think of some scenarios. Perhaps he was disaffected, the way that The Chosen, where that clip came from, they built up a character who was slightly autistic. People didn't get him. He was different to others. He said it, he just said what came out of his mouth. He didn't think about things. And so he was rejected. And so their take was that he ended up becoming a tax collector because he liked figures, he was happy collecting money, and he knew nobody liked him. Or it may have been that he became greedy, because although you were disliked, as a tax collector, you could make a lot more money than the fishermen. Peter and Andrew wouldn't make as much money, because every time they caught fish, they would have to give a lot to the Romans to pay their tax, whereas Matthew was making all the time. We don't know how he went from being a Levi, which his parents wanted him to being a Matthew. We don't know where that name come from, but Jesus called him Matthew. And Matthew means gift of God. So it maybe was that as Jesus called him, he realized that he was a gift of God. Now, in the passage as it reads, Jesus walks past, sees Matthew in his tax box, and he says, "Come, follow me." I think there is a bit of background, and when you watch something like The Chosen, it fills in that background. Whether that's accurate or not, we'll never know. But imagine the hubbub that was going on in that place at that time. This man was getting a reputation, Jesus that is. They'd seen him calling people, they'd seen him doing miracles. Just before this incident, they see him healing somebody, giving them their life and mobility back. They'd seen Jesus do an unprecedented thing. He'd seen a leper, and when you saw a leper coming, ringing the bell, everybody went like this. You don't want to be near a leper. But Jesus has gone to the leper and touched him and healed him. And Matthew would have been aware of these things. There was a hubbub going on. And so it's not just as if Matthew had never seen Jesus. I think he would have heard of Jesus, heard of what was going on. But now he has this encounter with him. And he is the least likely candidate for Jesus to call, or at least in everybody else's eyes, because tax collectors are absolutely the bottom, the pits, the muck on your shoe. That's how they're seen. So Jesus, in everybody's mind, would not go to a tax collector. And yet, he walks past this booth, he pauses, he looks this man in the eye, and he said, "Come, follow me." And as we saw in the film, after that initial puzzlement, Matthew comes out of his booth, hands the key to the Romans, hands the ring that gives him the authority. "I don't want that anymore." And as you saw, the Roman soldier said, "Well, what are you doing? You're giving up a comfortable life." And "I don't know what I'm doing." But he said, "Come follow me," and I'm going to follow him. And that is amazing. You saw again in the film that the disciples, Jesus' disciples were, "You what? You what? Him? No." And Jesus said, "No, things are different now. Things are different, and I've called him." And that's amazing, because I don't suppose any of us would see ourselves as bad as tax collectors. But if we understand the gravity of sin, each one of us was as bad a sinner as that tax collector, because in God's eyes, he doesn't have a league table. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So just as Jesus looked at Matthew and said, "Come follow me," most of us here, or all of us here, I would hope, at some time have heard that call of Jesus where he has said, come, follow me. And in doing that, we can trust him. We can go with him. It's funny, when you look at what Jesus said at the end of Matthew, he said, go into all the world and go and make some Christians. Is that what he said? Did he tell us to do that? Well, no, disciples, that's right. He said, go into the world and make disciples. And this is a big difference. Sometimes Christians feel that all you've got to do is go to somebody, talk to them, tell them about sin, say, here, look, here's a prayer, read this prayer. Oh, you're now a Christian. But that's not what Jesus said. He said, come, follow me. And following him is about being a disciple. It means that we now turn around and instead of living life how we were, like Matthew, who was perhaps greedy and he was perhaps building up a nice fortune, he turned right around and followed him. And how do we know this? Well, what happened is Jesus said, we're going to have a feast. And Matthew said, well, where are we going to have a feast? And he said, well, we're going to your place to have a feast. And Matthew would have said, but who are we going to invite? Nobody likes me. And Jesus said, well, invite the people that you know. And who would he know? The other tax collectors, the lowlife. And he invited them to his home. And this shows a great turning around, because he was willing then, the money that he'd been collecting up and making his own, he was willing because Jesus said, spend that money, give a great big banquet. And straight away, the old Matthew would have said, no way, I've worked hard for that, I'm not giving it away. The new Matthew said, yes, come on, let's have a feast. And why was that? Already he was following Jesus. He was becoming a disciple. What happens when someone becomes a new convert? And we've all seen this. It can almost be a little bit embarrassing, can't it? A new convert, because they just go up to everybody. I want to tell you about Jesus. Jesus has saved me, and he needs to save you, and you should stop swearing. Yeah. And as we become more mature, we don't want to offend anybody, so we kind of batten it down a bit. And perhaps that's right, perhaps that's wrong. We shouldn't use that enthusiasm. But you can just imagine Matthew going out and saying, I've started a new life. Come on, lads. I want to tell you who it's all about. It's him, Jesus. He's going to do something. So excited. And all these lowlife who is invited to his party are getting the message about Matthew. It's quite interesting. The woman at the well, she was a bit like a Matthew. She'd had lots of relationships. Nobody liked her. She had to go to the well when no one else was about because they'd all taken the mickey out of her. And she had this encounter with Jesus. And what did she do? Straight away, she ran into her town and said, I want to tell you something about this man who knew everything about me. That new convert. That's amazing, isn't it? But then we have the Pharisees. And in the start of the story, the passage that we heard, they'd seen something happening, a miracle that Jesus had done, and they'd seen other miracles. And you wonder at this early stage of Jesus' ministry whether the Pharisees were in two minds. You know, they would have thought, well, he's not one of us, but the kind of things he's doing are quite good, aren't they? And, you know, maybe there could have been that in their mind. And then all of a sudden, he calls the lowest of the low. And the Pharisees are absolutely horrified. Can you imagine? You know, they wouldn't even go near Matthew. It would mean having to live in sackcloth and ashes to have a conversation with such as Matthew. And all of a sudden, Jesus has called Matthew, gone to his house, and he's now having a party with the lowlife. And not only they would have liked it if he was standing there and saying, "You're all going to hell," but he isn't. He's having great fun, he's drinking, he's eating, and he's having intimate conversations with him. He's laughing and he's joking with these lowlives. And the Pharisees are horrified. How could he, if he was anything, how could he possibly mix with these lowlives? And so what did they do? They went to no, they didn't go to Jesus. They went to his disciples and they said, "What on earth is your leader doing? Why is he mixing with them?" And there's a lesson in there, because it's a side lesson to the main thrust of what I'm saying. But there is a lesson in there for us, because we tend to do this as Christians. If other Christians upset us, we tend to go to someone who we know might be sympathetic and say, "Do you know what? That Paul, he gets on my nerves, he never wears a tie," or whatever. But, so there's a lesson, because Jesus would say, no, don't go to someone else. If you have a problem with somebody, go to them, talk it out. Let's be reasonable together. So that's just a side lesson, because these disaffected Pharisees didn't dare go to Jesus. They went to his disciples. They were grumbling, "How dare he mix with them?" But Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he turned to them and he answered them. He said, "Why do you think I've come? What is it you think I'm about? I haven't come for those you approve of, because they're already approved of. I've come for the rejected, for the sick. I'm like a doctor who has come for the sick," and he tries to explain it to them. But of course, the Pharisees don't get it, and you know where that leads to. It's strange, though, that the main lesson that we can take from this is in calling Matthew and in calling each one of us, we belong to Jesus in a very unique way. Every religion that there is says this, basically, that you're bad people and there's a God or a higher authority, and if you want to have some kind of relationship with that God, you've got to do something about it. So what it means is, whatever you're doing, you've got to stop doing it. You've got to work and work and work and work, and then hopefully you might get it right. Some religions say you can never get it right. If you're a Hindu and you've fallen so low, you've got to have several lifetimes of coming back as something else. In Islam, if you're young, you might have enough life left to do enough about it to appease Allah. But no, Jesus says, "Come, follow me. You don't have to do anything. I want you to change. Like Matthew, I want you to become my disciple. Like Matthew, I want you to stop every time you mean to do something and say, hang on a minute, now I'm following Jesus. What would he have me do?" But that's what's so unique about our faith. Jesus does the work and he says, "Come follow me." And as we walk with him as his disciples, we hopefully become more and more like him. Now, that isn't to say when he says, "Come follow me," we say yes, and then we walk off into a new kingdom. Yes, there is hard work. We do want to change. We do want to repent and turn round. But it's not what we do. It's what he's done. And as we shared these elements together, we remember it is finished. The work is done. And we can glorify, like Matthew, in our calling. And however old we are, he's called us today to be his disciples. And as we're his disciples, we're going to follow him. Hallelujah.